Welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name's Simon Hodgkins, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Martina Quinn. Martina, you're very welcome to the podcast. Let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself and tell us all about the world that you're involved in. So over to you, Martina.
Thanks, Simon. It's lovely to be here, and thanks very much for having me on the podcast. So as you said, my name is Martina Quinn, and I am the founder and managing director of a company called Alice. It's a public relations company based in Ireland. We have offices in Dublin, where I am today, and also in Belfast. So we work on an all-island basis across the island of Ireland. And at Alice, our purpose is to create change that makes Ireland and the world a better place. So we do that by delivering ambitious communications campaigns for our clients. And to give you an example of that, of the types of campaigns we work on, since I started the company back in 2015, we have worked on campaigns to promote reproductive rights, gender equality, climate action, LGBT rights, integration and anti-racism, health awareness, and lots to promote Ireland's rich culture and heritage as well. And then I suppose it's worth mentioning that alongside my work with Alice, I'm involved in 2 voluntary boards. So I've just recently become chairperson of the board of the Public Relations Consultants Association of Ireland, PRCA. And that's the association that represents PR agencies across Ireland. And then I'm also a member of the board of Women's Aid.
So Martina, thanks very much for sharing that. I want to ask you though, let's just go back a little bit. Why did you set up Alice PR, Alice Public Relations in the first place? Because obviously you founded this probably going on 8 years or so now, maybe a little bit more. What was the catalyst? Why did you do that originally?
Yeah, I'd been working in communications for about over 10 years at that stage, well over 10 years at that stage. I had studied journalism in university initially in DCU, and I worked as a freelance journalist for a while. And at the same time, I was working in an in-house communications role with a political party. And from that, I moved into an in-house role with a charity. And from there, I started working in agency PR. And I was with the same agency for almost a decade and felt I had gone as far as I could go within the structure that they had. Didn't really have a burning desire to set up my own business, but I decided to leave the agency that I was in and to do some freelance work for a while. And very quickly, I got very busy. So Alice happened almost by happy accident. After that, I ended up having more work than I could do by myself. So I started building a really good team of people around me, and bit by bit, we've grown since then.
Was that a daunting decision? Because obviously you did your BA in journalism, right? And as you say, you worked in sort of the company, the agency for near on 10 years or so. Was that a huge decision for you to make at the time? Because you didn't seem to be on this, I'll set up my own business trajectory. Mm-hmm. And yet it sounds like, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, it sounds like from pretty much the early stages of the business, you were busy. You had to figure out how you're going to deal with all this work. And that's not something we hear very often, because obviously, you know, we talk to founders and they're struggling for a little while, the work isn't flowing. So what do you think was different in your case? Was it the track record? Was it the network that you had? Was it the great work that you're doing? What do you put that down to, Martina?
Yeah, like a combination of things. You've touched on them all there. I suppose it wasn't too daunting a decision to answer that part of your question, because I didn't have a master plan. If I had thought I'm leaving my job to set up a business and I'm going to be employing people and I'm going to, you know, have to do all of this sort of management thing, that probably would have made it really daunting. But because it happened bit by bit and more sort of organically, it never felt very daunting. And in my previous role, I have been working at the most senior level in that PR agency and was running the place alongside the owner. So I guess I had the sort of experience of knowing what it took to win business and to manage staff and to manage client accounts successfully and so on. And then one of the most affirming things about setting up Alice was just how nice people were and how willing people were to refer business to you and to give you a chance. So I was really lucky that I was starting with a good network and a good track record. But then people sort of went out of their way to send business referrals to me in the early days. And that's continued. We still get most of our business through word of mouth. But it was great. People were very supportive, and it certainly enabled me to grow more quickly than I would have ever imagined was possible.
Thanks, Martin. And I love what you said at the start about you're trying to make Ireland and the world a better place, because that's a pretty big, audacious sort of goal, isn't it? And when it comes to the world of PR, I'm imagining that the landscape has changed quite a while since you set up in those early days. We have this plethora of online digital tools available to us now. There's an awful lot of noise out there. But when it comes to the true essence of PR, correct PR, what do you think are some of the fundamentals? Is there any sort of things that you see people still getting wrong when they think about PR? And how do you work with your clients? Is it retainer led? Is it sort of over a period of time? Is it for a particular project? Because I know you do a lot of work with state agencies, with charities, those kind of organizations, as well as commercial organizations, of course.
Yeah. Well, to talk a little bit about the fundamentals of PR, that has changed hugely since I started. I mean, social media didn't really exist when I started in my career, so it's hard to even imagine a world now where that was the case. And particularly for people who work in communications, who are so dependent now on using all of the various social media tools we have available to us. I think what the fundamentals are sort of having something worthwhile to say and saying it well. So the fundamentals of, researching who your audience is, what you want to say to them, what action you want them to take in response. That doesn't change. What changes is the medium. So, like years ago, the best way to reach an audience was through maybe getting articles into newspapers, or getting onto a local radio station, or running an advertising campaign in the print media. And now we know that's not as effective, because obviously people aren't buying newspapers as much or listening to the radio as much. So instead, you might be doing promoted posts on social media, or you might run an Instagram campaign and use influencers to collaborate with you, or you might do a big outdoor event activation. But none of those things will work unless you have a good message at the heart of it, and unless you've really tailored your message to your audience and you've spent time researching your audience. So those fundamentals haven't changed, and I don't think they'll change into the future. There's obviously lots of AI related change coming our way in now and in the years to come, and I still don't think that will, it'll change how we do things, but not the fundamentals of what we do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because actually it's the hot topic at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you're saying, look, there's some basic fundamentals here that still hold the test of time. So even though the tools and the technologies are changing, some of the basics about getting good PR right still hold true today, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, I'm really passionate about good PR, because I think, and it's the big irony of PR, that PR itself has a bad reputation. So a lot of people are very cynical about PR. They don't think that there's a lot of value in it, or if they do see a value in it, it's in a really negative way, that PR people are brought in as spin doctors to hide something or to clean up a mess. Whereas the type of PR that we do, and in fairness, I think the type of PR that's dominant across the sector, it's about helping people to tell their stories, or helping organizations to tell their stories. And that plays a really important part in a functioning democracy, that we're working with, as you said, we do lots of work with public sector organizations. They're publicly funded. They're doing work on behalf of the government. It's important that they are communicating to the public, like what they're doing, how they're spending public money, what progress they're achieving. And we can help them to do that. And then likewise with charities, without PR, nobody's going to know they exist, really. Nobody's going to be able to avail of their services and supports. So I think that's all, you can sort of tarnish it and people can scoff at like money badly spent on PR or whatever, but I think it is essential to have effective public communications. And I think it's exciting at the moment. I've started to dabble a little bit with some of the AI tools in a very just exploratory way, and some of it is terrifying, and some of it might make our jobs easier. That it'll provide a sort of practical help to us, but ultimately, as PR professionals, we need to be bringing something extra to our clients. Like, if an AI tool is able to do our job, we're not doing a very good job. We need to have the extra insights, the extra experience, the extra understanding that you're never going to have replicated through technology.
Yeah, thanks, Martina. There's some great points. And the other thing, before we change gears here, I want to ask you a little bit about your sort of volunteering, non-profit work. You sit on a number of boards. I know, for example, you were heavily involved as the chair for the Dublin 8 community, the education centre there. That was quite a long spell that you did there, both as vice chair and chair, but also the work that you're also doing at the moment, because whether it's PRCA or Women's Aid that you mentioned, could you maybe just unpack those a little bit for us, because you're doing some really important work there. And the other one that I do want to mention was when you were the chair for Show Racism the Red Card as well, another important area. So obviously you're heavily engaged in this type of work. Why do you do this type of work? And could you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing right now in these areas?
Yeah. So I suppose one of the things, you know, I said I studied journalism, and I worked in in-house communications roles. I never really saw myself going into PR, partly because of its bad reputation, but partly because I didn't realize you could do PR that reflected your own interests. And when I realized that, that's when my PR career started. So I have, and the type of PR I've done obviously reflects my own interests. So I have a natural interest in social justice issues, in current affairs, in politics. My parents were always very involved in their local communities and in helping organizations on a voluntary basis, and still are to this day, thankfully. So I think that set a good example for us. So I have gotten involved and been encouraged to do so by people around me throughout my career as well. I've gotten involved in voluntary boards. So the two that you mentioned that are sort of historic at this stage are DHCC, Dublin 8 Community Education Centre, and Show Racism the Red Card. I ended up chairing both of those boards at different points. DHCC is a local grassroots community education centre in the Liberties, which will be traditionally quite a disadvantaged part of Dublin. There were sort of low levels of educational attainment, and that centre provides second chance education for adults. And it's doing fantastic work currently with, for example, refugees from Ukraine who are coming to the centre to improve English. It works with older members of the community to improve their IT skills. It was a lifeline for people during the COVID-19 crisis. So doing really, really valuable work face sort of, and it was a privilege to be on that board for several years. And I only left it because my term of office was up. You know, I didn't have a choice in the matter really. With Show Racism the Red Card, then that is an education program that works with young people and uses the power and the profile of sports people to challenge racism. It was set up by the British footballer Shaka Hislop back in the 1990s, I think. And his whole genesis for the idea was that, you know, he was filling his car with petrol at a petrol station one day, and this crowd of young boys were shouting racist abuse at him. And when he turned around and they recognized that he was a famous footballer, they were suddenly over looking for his autograph. So the charity works with sports people from all sports disciplines. In the UK, it's very focused on football, but in Ireland, we've embraced the GAA and lots of other types of sports as well, and goes out into schools and works with kids in schools to challenge racism. My time on the board there was quite tricky towards the end because Show Racism the Red Card was very under-resourced here. It only had one staff member, and it really needed to evolve. And what we did at board level was we managed to negotiate with the Immigrant Council of Ireland to take over the Show Racism the Red Card programme. And very excitingly, just in the past week, only last Friday actually, they relaunched Wear Red Day, which was a big flagship initiative of Show Racism the Red Card, where they asked schools and workplaces around the country to wear something red to show their support for integration and to show that we're a welcoming society. So that was relaunched last Friday, and it was great. It was a nice sort of finishing touch to my work on Show Racism the Red Card to be able to go along to that. And then currently the two boards I'm on, as I said, are Women's Aid and the PRCA. So the PRCA is very work focused. I joined that board 3 years ago and was made chair this year, and it's brilliant. It's been hugely supportive because I guess when I set up Alice, I was sort of operating very much by myself as the agency owner, wasn't sure if the challenges that I was experiencing were similar to what other agency owners felt, and so on. So joining the PRCA and its board really helped me to connect with other agencies around the country and learn from them and share experiences with them. And there's a very supportive community in the PR industry here, which is brilliant. And then Women's Aid, I joined the board about a year and a half ago, and it does hugely important work, obviously, in helping women who are victims of domestic violence. It can be quite a harrowing board to sit on. You know, the stories that you hear of the women helped by the organisation and the issues that they're addressing are tough and upsetting, but it is doing such important work, and it does it brilliantly. It's such a well-run organisation. I have huge time and respect for the people who work there.
Well, thank you, Martina, and thanks for giving us the insight into that area of your work as well, because not only are you running this successful PR company and organization across the island of Ireland and elsewhere, but you're also sitting on a number of really important boards here that are making big difference in community. And it's obvious, I mean, it resonates that you have a passion and expertise in things like social justice and other really important areas. So thank you for sharing that. I want to change gear a little bit, and I do like to ask the guests a little bit about themselves, just so our international audience can find out a little bit about. It's not quite quick fire round, but I'm going to hit you with a few questions and be very interested in your responses. So the first thing I like to ask is about your own learning style, Martina. Are you an avid reader? Are you constantly searching the internet? Are you an audiobook person? Do you prefer physical books? When you onboard information, whether it's for business or pleasure, what sort of mediums do you use? What do you prefer? What do you lean towards?
I'm quite old school. I'm sort of laughing when you say, am I an audiobook person? Because I have never listened to an audiobook, and I'm a huge reader. I love reading, but I have to have the physical book. I have progressed to reading my news online. I'm not that old school, but so I will read. I read like all of the sort of course I have to for my job, but I read all of the like national newspapers and consume lots of news media. At more outside of Ireland, I would read The Guardian every day. And I sort of dabble in various other publications internationally as well. And then I read lots of books. I've had a baby quite recently. I have a little 9-month-old boy. So my reading has gone down as he has gone up. But typically I would read in bed every night before I go to sleep. And I'll read a mixture of, I love history books. I love books about Irish history in particular, modern Irish history. I read a brilliant book recently called The Persuaders, which was quite focused on my work. It's by an American journalist. Hopefully I'll pronounce his name right, but it's Anand Giridharadas, and he goes around America speaking to activists who are trying to break down the really polarized Republican-Democrat divide that has become entrenched there. Really fascinating if you work in communications. So I read things like that, and then I also read lots for fun. Like I'm currently reading Stanley Tucci's book on his life through food, which is a good entertaining read for anybody who's into food, and it's sprinkled with recipes throughout. And we actually have an Alice book club, which is sort of current and former team members of Alice. We meet once every 6 weeks or so. So our current read for that is a book called Boys Don't Cry by an Irish author, Fiona Scarlett, and it's really good. It's set in sort of almost gangland Dublin, but a very good read as well. In terms of my wider learning style, yeah, I think I'm pretty old school. Like my approach to reading probably is reflected in my learning style overall. I find I take information in really well when I've written it down. And I still use, I'm still quite paper-based, so I love writing in pencil, and I'll write notes in pencil, or if we're, brainstorming around a campaign for a client or in a meeting with a client where we're strategizing, I'll have written quite an extensive note, and I'll have written it in longhand. And I find that helps me retain information very well. So I haven't changed since my school days.
I love that, Martina, and I love the mix and the breadth of it. So obviously you've got, and congratulations on the 9-month-old, because obviously you're into the fairy tales and the children's books as well. But what a great mix, and what a great sort of way that you do. But I do love, there's something quite special about picking up a book and putting the little notes into it. I do like that. Yeah. So thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
no problem.
The other thing I want to ask you is about throughout your journey, and it is a journey, you've achieved an awful lot and the journey continues, but along the way, people must have helped you, people must have inspired you. There might be people that you admire, or maybe it's a particular character trait. But when I ask you that, who springs or what springs to mind, Martina, when it comes to people that you admire or people that may have inspired you?
Yeah, I think I mean there's probably not one like individual person who I really look up to. A group of people who I really admire, and I don't know if you can even describe it as a homogenous group. I really admire ordinary people who face extraordinary challenges and overcome them or get through them. And I'm thinking even of, I was saying some of the stories we hear about the women who are helped by Women's Aid, who are living through everybody's worst nightmare, experiencing daily violence and fear and coercive control at the hands of their husbands or intimate partner. And yet those women can manage to sort of take care of their children or hold down a job or just try to get on with their daily life as best they can. I think that takes a huge amount of strength. I can't imagine how much strength that takes. And I think the same about, people fleeing war or poverty, or the people who've been really affected, for example, by the recent earthquake in Turkey and Syria, people in Ukraine at the moment, in Afghanistan, where they probably never consider themselves inspirational or heroes, but they're doing their very best to just try to keep going and keep their families going. And I think that's as admirable as anybody can be. At a more individual level, there obviously have been different people along the way who have been hugely beneficial to me and to Alice. God, I'm nearly scared to name names because I'll inevitably forget somebody, but Dermot Ryan, who's the chairperson of our company, has been brilliant. He's a former boss of mine. He was my old boss many years ago, and then moved to Australia for a while. And when he came back from Australia, it was very fortuitous because I had set up Alice and he was able to help me initially as an associate director and then came on board as chairperson of our board last year. And he's been really supportive throughout my career. Alva Smith, who is a very well-known feminist and activist here, and who led Ireland's successful campaign to repeal the Eighth Amendment from the Constitution and to legalise abortion. She is somebody who we've worked with since the early days of Alice, and again, hugely inspirational and hugely supportive of our work. And I would say the same for Sonia Lennon, who's the leader of the Work Equal campaign, a campaign on gender equality that we've worked on. They're people who we worked really closely with, really enjoy working with, but who've also really championed us to their own networks, which has been brilliant. So they've helped us to grow and become who we are.
Yeah, I really like that, Martina. Thanks for sharing it. And just going back to what you said about people that you admire, and sometimes it's not the people, no pun intended, that you read in the headlines. It's scratching the surface on some of those human stories, isn't it? And realizing there's an awful lot of people dealing with an awful lot of challenges, and I know in one sense it's very difficult to dive into those stories, but on the other side, there is that admiration and that I don't know how people keep going sometimes in those
people
really
are
tough
just amazing. I mean,
circumstances.
I feel I have been very lucky in my own life, and touch wood, but I haven't faced massively challenging circumstances. And then you read about what some people go through, and they almost shrug it off, so people do hugely inspirational and heroic things every day without ever considering themselves in that role.
Yeah, 100%. And the next thing I want to ask you is about advice. Now, obviously, you share a lot of knowledge and advice around this world of PR that you're involved in. But what about, broader advice? It can be business related or can be life related. What's the best advice you've received, or is there advice that you find yourself passing on to others?
Yeah, there's one piece of advice that I just got last year that has stuck in my head, and it has been really beneficial. We did a piece of work for Alice ourselves last year on refreshing our brand, and we built a new website and sort of updated our value proposition and how we speak about our work and what we do. And as these things are always, it was long overdue, you know, so we felt we were still describing ourselves in startup terms almost, even though we have been 7 years in existence at that stage. So we worked with a really good consultant who's based in the UK, who I had come across through PRCA connections, actually, a guy called Crispin Manners. And Crispin sort of guided myself and the senior management team through this process of, you know, really testing us on who we want to be as an agency, what sort of work we want to do, who we want to work with, who we want to appeal to. And his advice was be like Marmite. So by that, he meant, you know, people need to either love you or hate you, maybe not that extreme, but when they land on our website or when they get a proposal from us, they can see straight away, this is the agency for me or it's not. And I think I had suffered always from that sort of typical like founder of a startup mentality where we couldn't say no to business, you know, everything that came our way, it was like, yeah, we'll take that, we'll try that, we'll do that. And he really challenged us to home in on our natural areas of expertise and strength, which is the non-profit work, whether it's with the public sector or with the charity clients, and to really own that space. So I hope that's now reflected in our website. The feedback we've gotten on that is certainly good, but you know, we certainly don't think our website will appeal if, for example, you're a big, I don't know, if you're a fast fashion retailer or you're a car brand or something like that and you land on the Alice website, it should be fairly apparent we're not the PR agency for you. That's not really the sort of work we do.
Such an important point, Martina, because and I hear what you're saying. When you're starting off a business, there is that tendency to just take the job, right? Because you need to get the revenue in, you've got costs to pay, you're kind of almost delighted that the work's coming in. But over time, you do adjust and you do sort of trim the sails a little bit because you have to chart your own course. You have to plot that direction. And I think it's a really important bit of advice that you're sharing there, because not everybody, you don't need to appeal to everybody. And I like the Marmite. It's such a simple sort of analogy or way to phrase it, but it gets to the point, you know, this is who our customers are. This is the direction we're going in. And if you fit this spot, we're probably ideal for you. I really like that. Yeah. Next thing I want to ask you is about going forward. So as you look to the next year, the next 6, 9, 12 months, or even further ahead, how does planning work for you now at Alice? How do you think about the future? And is there anything on the horizon that you're looking to do or achieve?
Yeah, I sort of feel like we're in a state of flux, partly because I think everybody feels a bit like that after COVID. And I've only come back from maternity leave myself in recent months. And, you know, there's been some changes in staffing in the company and everything. So it's a state of flux, not necessarily in a bad way. I feel like it's opening up maybe opportunities for us to change the way we've always done things and to shake things up a little bit. In terms of our ambitions, I'm not particularly looking to grow the company in a numbers way. You know, I don't want us to, we've about 20 on our team at the moment. I don't want to really get much bigger than that. I would obviously like to continue growing our profitability, because it's really important to me that people have a secure and sustainable career path at Alice, and that the work they do ensures they can live a good quality life. I feel very strongly about that, because I think sometimes when you're working with charities and in that space, there's a sense that you should nearly be doing your work for free, or it's not as valuable as people who are working with really like commercial clients with huge budgets. But the work that we do is just as important and just as expert, and I think deserves to be just as well paid. So I do want to continue to grow profitability for the company. That's obviously important. And part of that at the moment means that I'm looking at ways that we can become more efficient and more effective. Is there new software tools that we can use? Are there different systems that we can introduce? So we're doing a bit of a review of our structures and operations currently, and I'm hoping that will lead to efficiencies. And then I'd love us to do a little bit more work internationally, keeping up like in line with the issues and the types of campaigns that we work on here. We've done bits and pieces at an international level previously. We are part of an international network called the Ultra European Network. It's run by an Italian headquartered agency called Familial Bloom. A couple of us are heading over to Italy this summer to their big Network Summit. So I'd love to explore wider international links and see if we can build on some of the successful campaigns we've run here to maybe replicate those in other countries.
Yeah, they sound like some great goals, and I'm a little bit jealous that you're heading over to this great festival in Italy. That sounds wonderful. Yeah, it sounds great. And as we come to also almost to the end of our time together, there's a couple more things I want to squeeze in, Martina. One is, if there's anything else that we haven't touched on that you'd like to maybe shine a light on with our worldwide audience, or maybe it's something we have touched on that you want to re-emphasize. And secondly, and importantly, if people want to find out more about Alice, about the work that you're doing, about the organizations that we've mentioned in this episode, where's the best place to send people to?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. Our website is alicepr.com. So people are very welcome to check that out, but also very welcome to contact me directly. You'll get me on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at Martina P. Quinn. I'm on Instagram and so on as well. So, and I'm always really happy to talk to people. I often will meet students who are considering a career in PR to have a chat with them. I'm quite passionate about nurturing the next generation of PR talent. So always very happy to have a cup of coffee or a telephone call with people if they're interested. The only closing point I'd make that maybe we didn't touch on is one of the priorities that I sort of set for myself as chairperson of the PRCA is around increasing diversity in the sector. Like many sectors, and particularly in Ireland, where we've traditionally been quite homogenous as a society, there's not a huge amount of diversity in any sense in PR at the moment, not just ethnic diversity, but also in terms of the sort of, I don't even like using the word class, but the sort of class backgrounds that people come from. It all tends to be very white, very middle class, very, multi-generation Irish sort of profile. And I'd love to take that up a bit. I'd love to see more people coming into the profession from non-traditional roots, from non-traditional things, and with different stories and experiences to share and help us to continue to do PR really well.
That's such an important point, and it's a great point to leave people thinking about as well. So thank you so much indeed, Martina. It's been wonderful having you as a guest here on the Global Discussion today. Thanks to everybody who's watching or listening to this podcast around the world. We certainly do appreciate it. I'd like you to like, follow, subscribe, do all the things I need you to do to help support the podcast. And I hope that you'll join me back here for more discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. So thank you, Martina. It's been wonderful to catch up with you today. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Simon.